Welcome to episode 4 of ADHD Chatter. This week I speak to an amazing ADHD life coach called Christian Ehmen. Christian shares his story with an amazing amount of honesty, and he shares the tips that he's used that has helped him maximise his ADHD and harness it in a positive way. He's one of the most passionate people I think I've spoken to on this topic. You can hear it in his voice when he's speaking about it. I think you're going to get a lot from this episode. I certainly learned a lot from it. I'll let the episode speak for itself. Here we go. Hey, Christian. Thank you so much for joining me on this Friday afternoon. Starting from the very beginning, if I could speak to your parents or I could speak to your teachers or anyone who knew you as a child, how would they say Christian was and behaved?
Yeah, I was known as being very dreamy. That's definitely one thing I recall. And just to put this into the ADHD context, I don't fit into that typical boy jumping over tables kind of concept or idea of ADHD. I'm more like on the inattentive side of things. I mean, definitely like I would say creative, but like also absent minded, dreamy, possibly. Always forgetting things, always forgetting stuff. Actually, like many things that about my childhood, I can reflect better on in hindsight. So post diagnosis, like more things add up, more things make sense. Which is very important also in terms of self forgiveness, I would say also, but also forgiving other people, because you only can see, with your, I guess, mindset that you have at the time. I would say like 25 years ago, ADHD was not so, I think there was much less awareness than there was today, I guess. So yeah, I mean, these words would definitely apply. I think it also depends on like to whom you're talking to, and yeah, these are like the first things that are coming to mind, possibly much more later on.
I think there'll be a load of people listening who will listen to you say that and recognise themselves in that. I certainly do. I wasn't the traditional problem child or hyperactive. I relate to what you said. I was quite dreamy, I suppose. If you read my school reports, I think they would probably say that I was very quiet and I had potential, but I lacked the motivation. Very quiet, very back of the class, not a problem child. What do you think your school reports? Do you remember what they used to say?
Yeah, it's a fun thing, like, can you show me your school reports on like 20, 30 years? Ask somebody with ADHD, where the heck, how should we know like your documents are? I don't know. I mean, they do exist. At some point, I had to drag them out for the diagnosis, so I had to call up my parents. Do you have them somewhere still? And so on. I'm not sure whether there was anything, quote unquote, worthwhile what people who do a diagnosis would be looking for. Yeah, I think it was overthinking a lot of things and trusting myself to do stuff on my own in the way it was expected. I think that was like a challenge. However, I'm not quite sure. I mean, like usually you find more content in primary school reports because then it's usually written. When you go up, in secondary school, usually it's just grades, so there's not much, information. I mean, there's lots of difference. I think in primary school, just looking at grades, it was very, very good actually. But I think I was back then maybe like intelligent or smart enough that this was sufficient at that time to mask it, right? Whereas it's very different, I guess, when you become a teenager in secondary school and when you graduate, and then there's more independence asked from you and organizing yourself. So that was definitely different. So yeah, so I'm not sure what's in the school reports, and I mean, you would just have to follow me with a camera.
Yeah. Oh no, it's really interesting because. I remember my school reports really well, and I think they sort of said what I mentioned earlier, is that I was very quiet and had the potential, but didn't necessarily have the confidence to act on it. And did you ever have any experiences with sort of, I suppose we would call it rejection sensitive dysphoria now, but I could look back through my early years and see some moments where that was apparent. Did that ever crop up in your earlier years?
Yeah, I mean, all the way through adulthood. And it's interesting when you said like now we can say rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Of course, that's not like a term in your vocabulary as a 7, 8, or 9-year-old or a teenager, or all these things. Of course, like over interpreting and overthinking every word that's being said in your presence or about you, and then like asking yourself, does this person have a problem with me? Did I do something wrong? Also, like the fear of reaching out to somebody because there might be, so yeah, I mean that's definitely a huge narrative, which is luckily much better now. I mean, of course, it never goes away. There will always be this experience, but now knowing that I have ADHD, I can relate it to my ADHD and work better with it. Like because the awareness is there, and so yeah, I mean, of course, it does show up, but then I spot it. I can catch it much better. Back then, I think it was more of a question for me, like I'm bad, I'm not cool, I'm not like this, I'm not worthy to, and all these different kind of things. So yeah, I mean that definitely did show up a lot.
It can really stop you from putting yourself forward, I find, even when I understand it more now, because it's sort of a defense mechanism where you don't want to put yourself in a position where you might make yourself vulnerable to rejection or criticism. But I think with the awareness that I have now, and understanding that it is probably a character defect of mine, and actually it's not necessarily the person in whatever situation it is that is giving me some feedback, negative feedback, to not take it to heart. And with the understanding and with it wrapped around the context of ADHD, I now am aware that it's not necessarily whoever it is who's telling me something that might be perceived as rejection or criticism, that it's actually not them being a horrible person, which I think when I look back and I think to my teachers, occasionally, I would get told off, and another child without ADHD might be frustrated at the time. But for me, I can think of a couple of occasions where I quite rightly got told off for something, and I would withdraw, and for the rest of the day I would go and really go in on myself, even probably more than I had done before. And I just got this really strong, like, internalized feeling of, I suppose, shame and rage, funnily enough. There was like this feeling of how dare they tell me off. There was like this indignant shame and rage, I suppose. Do you ever get sort of a feeling of anger?
Yeah, I mean, Evan, good catch there. It is really like my experience, a mixture of anger and shame, and being angry at the person, but also angry with yourself because you like to be different. And it's actually really what was happening to me, or what's happening. Anger, frustration, which resulted, like, for me, like throwing things around, for example, but never in a way that it would get me into trouble too much, funny enough. So I would not do that in class. I might do that at home, but only when nobody else is around. Yeah, I guess I sort of needed something to release it. Yeah, it is a mixture of shame and anger at the same time.
When was ADHD first mentioned in your life?
I think maybe I'm not like really, I don't have like good memories about it. When I was 14, my parents took me to a child psychologist. But of course, as a teenager, as teenagers, you have problems galore anyway, with figuring yourself out. And then you see psychologists and you have like this idea of what that means, like that you're mad or crazy. And I, had big problems going in there, and I think I was not very helpful. In hindsight, I learned it was about ADHD suspicion, but they didn't find anything for some, I don't know whether the diagnostic tools have changed since then. I mean, I certainly know that lots of people go undiagnosed because they don't fit into that diagnostic scheme, if you will. But later on, it was actually my wife. Back then, we were she was my girlfriend, or about to be my girl, or something along those lines. And there was like certain behaviors she observed about me, because like her brother has ADHD, is diagnosed with ADHD, and like, for example, she's from Brazil, so she speaks Portuguese, so she wanted to teach me Portuguese as well, and she made like some like flashcards and whatever. So, but not only that, but I will also like book tickets wrong, or like for the wrong day, or like overspend money on certain things, like and that somewhat seemed to be familiar to her. And then she told me, I mean, I can remember, I can't remember this. It's like so unfair sometimes. But she told me that when she told me that, I think you have ADHD, apparently my response was, no, I don't. What's that? Like, first, no, I don't. And then what's that? It doesn't make sense. But so I think I cast it aside for a while. It was later when I was living in Vietnam. I was there for 3 years, working at an international school there, and then everything was just like worse because I'm not sure to what extent expat culture, or like just being by myself there without any rules, because like living in Vietnam as an expat sometimes was a bit like the Wild West, if you will. And just being there without any rules and just like joining all the drinking and the partying and whatnot. And but also like really struggling in the workplace. I mean, including RSD big time, because whatever I tried to do, I mean, I was working very hard in my job and was creating all like individualized things and lessons and whatnot. But yeah, but it was like working twice as hard for the double amount of negative feedback, if you will. And then she visited me also there for 3 months. And then it was very challenging for her because I was frustrated all the time and angry. And so she had a bad experience too. So we were looking around and tried, okay, like where in Ho Chi Minh City in Saigon can we find any support? So there was a French clinic, I guess, where they had a psychologist. And I mean, there wasn't like any official diagnosis, but the information I gave was enough that I got prescribed Concerta. I think it was Concerta, like the medication, which I used for a while. Back then, I also disclosed my ADHD to my line manager. She said it's better not to talk about it, which I'm afraid. And talking also other ADHDers, it's unfortunately. It seems like disclosing your challenges in the workplace is usually not that welcome. In hindsight, I would say it's not because she meant it was like out of a bad intention. Possibly quite the opposite. Maybe to protect me because like she is also aware of the stigma and she doesn't want to get me into trouble or whatnot. So I didn't have an official diagnosis, but so then took it for a while, and then when my wife, back then still girlfriend, we were not married yet. When she left, going back, and I was still there for a couple of months, I stopped taking it because I didn't want to spend money on the medication. And then like next year when I moved to Switzerland, then everything, like the same pattern came over and over again. It was like whenever I went to a new workplace, it was like, okay, but this time it's working out. I just have to pull myself together. So this time it's working out. Then do this, and this. And then it was like, it's crazy. It's like the same thing happening over and over again. And I just don't find a way around it. And so that was very, very frustrating. Like also, of course, how people would respond to it. And you cannot make meaning of that. And so it was, 5 years ago where everything took a complete nosedive again. And the question was, is she going to put up with this any longer or no? So then we went to have like an official diagnosis finally, and then it was like clear as night and day that I have ADHD. Fun fact, I nearly forgot my wallet there, so just like the additional confirmation of the diagnosis. So and yeah, then I got medication prescribed, and then many things changed positively, actually quite quickly, because like one skill I developed over time of the years is definitely resiliency. Because no matter like how often I failed, I always got myself up again and try harder. I mean, not always in the healthy sense, but I always, I think I was like headstrong enough, like when I really wanted something, that I really was putting my mind to it. And now with the medication, like many things changed. I was about to lose my job, but then after medication, like so many things changed, and I showed up totally different, that I could stay with not only that, it like many things completely changed. And I actually forgot now what the original question was, but I think it was like
I can't remember either.
mapping out my my AD, yeah, I think yeah, when did I hear ADHD for the first time? So yeah.
That was fascinating. I mean, there's so much to delve into there. And you sort of, talked about your partner recognizing it because she had a ADHD in her brother.
Yeah.
And you mentioned disclosing in the workplace. Now that's a whole conversation on its own. So I'm gonna put that to one side for a minute. We could talk about that for hours. The diagnosis process in Vietnam, what did that involve?
It was basically the psychologist asking me a couple of questions about my challenges, took a couple of notes. I'm not sure whether there was like any testing involved. I mean, as I said, it was not an official diagnosis, it was a suspicion. So, and he also didn't give me a diagnosis. He said there's a suspicion that, but of course I'm not sure like what like the, drug regulations are there, but it was, so the information he had was enough that I could get the concern that I could get a prescription for the medication. So let me put it this way. I mean, there were like other things in the air, like anxiety, which now like I would relate to RSD. So later on when I got my official diagnosis, actually it's super interesting how little I can remember from having diagnosed. Maybe that means it was a good diagnosis. I don't know. But I definitely can remember like to sketch out some things or to connect certain numbers and whatnot, and some questions I had to answer. Yeah, and yeah, interesting point. I think I want to go back to that and see like what were the actual questions. I think back then I was only interested in like, having it black on white and knowing what it is. So
the diagnosis process in the UK, lots of questionnaires filled in by yourself and also by someone who knew you well from your early years, and then you have I had a 2-hour meeting with a psychologist, and then you get the feedback, and similar to you, mine came back as the words were clear as hell. It was really bizarre. She said that she could sort of, even before we started the process or the interview, she looked at me and could just tell by mannerisms and the way I was presenting on the phone call that it was a high chance that I had ADHD. You mentioned medication. Now, medication is we're not giving out medical advice. I'm fascinated by the topic. I've never taken ADHD medication. I drink a lot of coffee, but when you said you've taken it, I think you said Concerta.
Initially, yeah. I mean, that was in Vietnam. Now it's actually Ritalin.
How did it help, or was it good or bad overall?
It was overall a very good experience. I found myself having definitely less mood swings. That's for sure. I was. I'm not sure if I was more organized per se necessarily, but my outlook to life changed a little bit. I felt more capable and able of actually doing the things or getting things done. But I think the biggest impact was definitely on my mood swings and being able to focus for a longer period of time. I think that's like the biggest one on certain tasks. And some. I don't want to say someone's being completely sucked in, but that's definitely a big difference. It helped me, especially if I'm in an environment where there are lots of stimuli happening at the same time. So that means I don't always take it. I can be flexible with that. So I would take it much less during the weekend, for example, unless there's something like filing taxes or something, something like this. Yeah. And during the holidays, I don't really take it. So I can monitor that myself. But like, being able to focus for a longer period of time and having less mood swings, that was definitely, that was definitely a big change.
How old were you when you got diagnosed? Did you say late 20s?
Yeah, I was 28. Yeah, 28 when I got diagnosed.
And did you go on medication immediately, or was there a delay or a wait?
It didn't take a long time to get medication prescribed, actually. So I think from the assessment to the first time I took medication, I think only like maybe not even 2 months, much less actually. So no, it was quite good. And of course, like with the medication, there's to people who are listening, it doesn't work for everybody necessarily the same way, and there are many like other things too. So like the both of us, we are basically not qualified to give any advice on that, of course. But I guess always interesting to hear everybody's experience on how medication is affecting you. And and also like in this department, there seem to be lots of people who are strictly against it. There are people who are all about it. Sometimes I wonder like how much is actually based on science, how much is actually based on ideology. That's sometimes like a thing that you have to be aware of. But I would never cancel that option out. I mean, it's I think it's always like important to scan. So what kind of support systems are available, and how is that working for you?
Yeah, no, it is really good advice. And I was talking to Matt Gupwell. He was my guest on the first episode, and he had some really good perspectives with saying that, well, like any human being, you all have like a perfect version of yourself, and you have a not so perfect version of yourself. I'm not going to quote him, but that's roughly what we were talking about. And to set yourself up to be in your best version, you do certain things in the run up to whatever it is you need to do. So, for example, now I'm recording podcasts. So in the morning, to make sure that I hopefully present and my mind is in its best possible version, I go for a long run. I make sure that I'm hydrated. I don't do things like breathing exercises or meditate. I don't go to therapy. But for me, like running is my kind of thing that I've always kind of said is my ADHD medication, which isn't particularly helpful, and I'll probably change that if I do start taking ADHD medication. But the trajectory of my day is considerably different if I don't go for my morning run. For me, I find it really fires up my mind and enables me to have a more productive day than if I didn't go for a run. And I suppose everyone has their own different things that will make them function better. But also on the flip side, they might have things that, if they're exposed to, will negatively affect their day. For example, if I'm doing something like this, I don't post anything on social media for about 2-3 hours before it, because if I get a negative comment, or if I get someone saying, oh, you used to be funny, or this is really bad content, then it really affects how my brain works for the next 2 or 3 hours. I don't know if that's RSD or if that's just a normal response to criticism, but I really like to be on form for meetings, when I'm doing a talk on stage, when I'm recording these new podcasts. So I'm very careful what I expose myself to. So my question is, do you find that you subconsciously or consciously avoid certain things or do certain things to set yourself up and to give yourself the best possible chance of being the best version of Christian?
Yeah, I do. I actually have like two questions I journal on once a week, and the two questions are, I'm not sure where I got them from. You always got those questions from somewhere, and then you feel like, oh, it resonates, so I take it on and try it on myself. And the first question is what gave me energy this week? So like reflecting on the week and see what gave me energy, and then also what took me energy. What took my energy? If I can split this up into places, people, situations in general, just to have like a look at because you always know better in hindsight, right? Otherwise you can ruminate about potential things, what might help you until the cows come home. But so yeah, I do that. Possibly, I'm not sure like how much I do subconsciously. I have to bring it into consciousness, I guess, in order to make it effective. But there are a couple of things alongside the medication. I'm still trying out new things and figure myself out. I think that's for me also like the fun part of that journey, to be honest. So one thing is definitely in the morning, don't check the news. Don't watch the news. Don't check the news. And now this personal opinion of mine, but I have the feeling the news are not designed for you, to inform you, but to trigger you, because it has to sell somehow, like even if it's the big news, right? So, and I don't know an update every couple of minutes how many people got killed in scenario X, Y, and Z. Like regardless how horrible that are, don't want to downplay it. I recall like 15, 20 years ago, you just watched the news once a day, like at 8 o'clock, at least here, and you were good for the day. And now like you get this constant influx of news, and all the horrible things are happening in the world. Not that they're not horrible, but there's only as much as you can occupy your mind with. So I don't check the news in the morning. I check them maybe in the afternoon just to scroll quickly through it, just to be up to date. So that's one thing I do. I do meditate in the morning actually, and also do my exercise in the morning. I think also for like practical reasons, because this is like where I am, because then I have like ticked that off basically, and because I know if I say, oh, I'm just gonna do it later, I'm not gonna do it, unless if I have like a call, like either an intro call for coaching or a client call, whatever, that I have my ritual where I bring myself into better shape. So I have a mini trampoline which I use. So I jump on it a little bit. I do a couple of push-ups. I don't give myself a number. But what I also introduced in my day is having cold showers as well. I really I think I've started that about 2 years ago, and I really do see the benefit. I feel the benefits of it, otherwise I wouldn't do it. I do feel more alert, I do feel more sharp, and it's especially great because if I have a call in the afternoon, I don't really want to take my medication, because there are side effects too, like it's more difficult to fall asleep if I take it too late in the afternoon. So I'm trying to use some more, if you will, natural ways of stimulating myself. Nutrition must also be a big thing for me, and also reducing alcohol a lot, because I've been using, and I would say in hindsight, even though it sounds scary, abusing alcohol actually to relieve myself from pain or to stimulate myself if I felt bored. And looking back, it's hard for me to believe that I thought that this was okay. But of course, you're only smarter much later on. So that's definitely also another thing. And I'm always love to learn new things and try out new things that help me to be at my best self, if you will.
Firstly, thanks for being so honest. I want to get on to alcohol next, because it seems to be, not everyone, but it seems to be a common trend with some people who have ADHD. They sort of reach for dopamine in unhealthy places. But just going back for a second, the cold showers, you've mentioned that. How does it, so you jump in the cold shower and it wakes you up, it makes you feel more alert. Is that kind of the idea? And then that you carry that extra focus through. How does it affect you when you have a cold shower?
I mean, I cannot give you like a scientific breakdown. I'm more like of a tinkerer in that sense. On say I could try it out. Oh yeah, it works for me. So I keep on doing it if it's not hurting. So it definitely makes me more awake. It definitely makes me more alert. It definitely makes me more focused on what's happening right now. Because I guess that's simply what it does when you get exposure to cold or I guess to any kind of like strong stimulus of that sort. And I simply feel more alert. I simply feel more positive. I think I also feel my body heating up after that. I just feel more relaxed. Also, I just feel clear. I mean, I can only say like how it makes me feel and how it's working for me. So I think you need to ask other people about the science behind it. I mean, I checked it once, but I'm not like an expert in this. In that domain. But I tried it out. I felt it worked for me. I felt better after it. So I thought, okay, I continue to do it, unless I think I have a cold or something like this. This is like when I actually researched, should I still be having a cold shower, yes or no?
You've put the idea in my mind now. I feel like I need to, after this, run into the sea and experience the coldness. I mean, I do know what you mean, because of course I've been in the cold sea before, and I've had a a cold shower accidentally before, and you do get this alertness. It does wake you up. So I can really see the benefits, and I'm gonna give it a go. I think it'll be really, really fun, and well, maybe not fun, but definitely useful. And going back to the meditation thing, because that's something I've heard a lot of people just generally say. But I, for anyone who's listening that isn't familiar with meditation, and I include myself in that group, what does meditation look like, and how does it actually? What do you, if you're happy to share, like what do you actually do when you meditate?
It's definitely not like that. You have to empty your mind and chant Om. That's not what it is. I think that's what many people possibly think. You cannot empty your mind. Like if telling your mind to stop thinking is like telling your heart to stop beating. But the thing is, like our thoughts are always either in the past or in the future, and ruminate about things that already happened and things that might happen but don't impact us yet. So we often don't realize, what's happening around us or what's happening to us. So what it does for me, if I sit down and get present with myself, this is also where I get moments of, I'm not sure, like maybe some people would call it bliss, and definitely takes some practice, but it's also being more aware of what's going on in me right now. I'm being aware of my thoughts. If I'm aware of my thoughts and aware of what's going on in me right now, I can make better decisions of how to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, I tried out different practices. I mean, it's usually what I do, like 15, sometimes 20 minutes. I mean, I've been doing this for like a couple of years already, so I'm not sure like if I'm the best person to give advice on like how to get started on that. I mean, there are lots of different apps out there. I think Headspace is a popular one for beginners to get started. But yeah, I sit down on a comfortable place, usually cross-legged. You don't have to do it cross-legged. You can also do it sitting position with back straight. Then I take a couple of breaths through the nose and out through the mouth. And then I go into my 5 senses. So I'm trying to be completely aware of like, how does everything feel, like the clothes on my skin, like, what I feel underneath me, like feet on the floor, just to have like this complete presence apart from, and not either ruminate the past or overthink about the future. I don't want to say it's like an escape, maybe a little bit, but then also either having a mantra word, like I use the word one simply, or you can also just count your breaths, for example, just to get back into the present. I find it difficult, like to I'm not sure if that's helpful. I think that would require maybe another episode, and maybe to get a person on this podcast who is like really, really into that.
Well, you've planted the seed. You definitely planted the seed. You have in my mind anyway.
But meditation has been very helpful, and it's very difficult for me to imagine my life without meditation. But I also know people for whom it does not work at all, and they do yoga instead, which is also another form of getting present. With my backbone, yoga is kind of so. I think I tried yoga once, but like I always cancel that straight away. But maybe I just haven't found a practice yet that is beginner friendly. So I do meditate in the morning. In the afternoon, not so much. I haven't been doing this in the afternoon, but I'm very keen to experiment with lots of things like NLP and whatnot, and there is so much out there, of course, and eventually, it's much more important. And I find to look back and see like, how did it affect me? How did it work for me? Did it not work for me? And also that it's okay if it didn't work. Just because one person posts on LinkedIn, do meditate like for this amount of time every day, or do this, or have the cold shower. Don't get, don't feel ashamed if that is not working for you. This has been like what I'm talking to you about now, like in a couple of minutes, is like years of experimenting and practicing. So but that's, again, I find the interesting part of the ADHD journey, to figure yourself out, or to finally become the person who you already are, but you couldn't be that person because you cover yourself in layers of masks all the time. So sometimes I wonder whether I'm actually not changing, but actually finally becoming the real me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. You're spot on. And it's the main reason for starting this podcast is to talk about conversations like this and show that it's such a broad spectrum, the condition, and it affects all of us differently. It manifests differently in everyone. And if you have certain mechanisms or things that you do to help or to hinder, then it's going to be individualistic and so different, and what works for some people isn't going to work for someone else, and vice versa. I'm keen to talk about alcohol, but also you've mentioned masking, and I'm just trying to think which one to talk about first. I think we'll go into alcohol because that's something that is really close to my heart, having had a big issue with alcohol. In fact, for me, like, my alcoholism was my primary, or I thought was my primary trait or issue. And I think as I now look at my history of problematic drinking through the lens of ADHD, I think it was probably a symptom of the ADHD, and me sort of desperately craving stimulation and dopamine, and just, it was a way I dealt with the chronic boredom that sometimes life presented to me. There was a fantastic theory from my first guest who said that it was social media that gave me this massive flow of dopamine, the building of the social media communities. And then when I had to put my laptop away and try and match that level of rush and dopamine, that it was impossible because of the way social media platforms are, that I turned to alcohol. And the timing was perfect. It was sort of 2013 that I stopped using social media, and that's when I started drinking problematically, and I ended up in hospital on numerous occasions, and I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's a big part of my history. And I've only now, with the diagnosis of ADHD and the understanding and the awareness of the connection between ADHD and addiction, that I'm fascinated to talk to other people. I don't know if you're as extreme as that, or if you just, drink from time to time, or are you a casual drinker, would you say, or are you a problematic drinker? Or
no, I wouldn't say, like, difficult to say, like, what is a lot and what is I mean, that possibly depends on, like, whom you're talking to, but like, by medical standard, I think there's, like, a medical standard of how much alcohol a week is actually too much, and I was definitely above that standard. Like, nowadays is so at the moment I think I have like 1 or 2 drinks max a week, and that's basically it. I don't drink anything throughout the week, because I know, like, only one drink will have, even if it's a minor impact. It's like also like even regardless whether you brush your teeth or not, you still have that taste in the morning. You do, and I don't want to have that simply. And I know, like, when I get up in the morning, I want to be, fully alert, and I want to, be, in my best healthy condition that I can be, because I know my body will thank me. I know, it sounds like a cliche, but my body will thank me for that. And I think the last time we had, a couple more drinks, like, I think the entire weekend was, like, my ADHD played out much more dramatically. I had terrible mood swings, was way less unfocused. I think most people are anyway, when you drink too much, but I had the feeling that my ADHD traits were playing out much more dramatically, not in a good way. And that was like a further, motivation for me to really, really tone it down. So yeah, I mean, it used to be like in Vietnam, I think we went out 2-3 nights a week, so I would be drunk 2-3 times a week, which is like now, which I think is like that's crazy. But of course, you need to appreciate where you're coming from. And I know that would not happen again today, nowadays. So, but yeah, it's I think it's a common experience for many people. At least I talked to several people who did use alcohol also to self-medicate to get the stimulation they wouldn't get. And what I also heard is like apparently it's interesting when you said the social, like the dopamine rush you get from that social media experience, and then you close your laptop and then okay, what now? That's apparently the reason what I heard why many like rock stars become alcoholics, because like after like the rush, the dopamine that you have when you perform on stage, it all suddenly is gone when you're off stage or when you are not on tour, and then you try to find a substitute to get like the same level of excitement. So I'm not sure like whether it fits into the ADHD narrative here, but talking about dopamine or about stimulation is I think it makes sense that I mean it's being used as a tool, unfortunately, to self-medicate, and I think that's why this experience is possibly also so common. Yeah.
No, absolutely right. I agree. And I think I and many others with ADHD, I think, but I can only speak for myself. I think things a lot stronger than a lot of people. I feel happiness, I feel sadness, I feel joy, I feel excitement, I feel boredom a lot more strongly than other people. So it can be chronic. I mean, the good times can be super good, and then the bad times can be really bad. And so when I close my laptop and I put the social media away, the contrast is much more extreme. So the boredom is suddenly chronic, and I'm desperate to find an alternative source of entertainment, and it's just so easy to pick up a bottle, and the reward is instant. There's no delay at all, and there's no effort either. Of course, it takes no effort to swallow a bit of liquid, and you feel amazing. And then once you get that sensation, you want more and more and more and more, and it turns into a compulsion, and there's no ability to stop. So it makes sense as well with the rock star analogy, and I can see the similarity between that rush that they get on stage to the rush that I get when I post the content that gets thousands of likes. So they come off stage, or I turn off my computer, and where's the bottle? I need to carry on this almost artificial level of joy and excitement that isn't like a healthy level. No, I can relate 100%. I mean, it sounds like you can drink. It sounds like you have had perhaps drank a little bit too much at times, but you've got it to a degree under control now. I mean, the fact that you can drink a couple of drinks a week suggests that you have that ability to moderate your drinking.
Yeah, moderation is difficult with ADHD.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure. Do you know did you read Faster Than Normal by Peter Shankman?
No, I've never read a book, and it's not something I'm I've tried. Like, don't be fooled by the books behind me. But
yeah, makes decoration. No, I think I have it as audiobook. I think he said about moderate. Like, there's no such thing as moderation for ADHDers, and that's why he doesn't understand why anything like leftover pizza, why that exists. It's either gone or not.
Masking, that's a topic I'm really keen to cover probably before we end. I want to talk about masking, and then if we got time, I think we should just mention the ADHD coaching, because that's actually something I'm fascinated about. But just first, it's a broad question and it's a big one, but do you think you mask, or you have masked in the past?
Yeah, I mean definitely. It's like I think like the metaphor always used is like Jane Goodall went to Africa to study primates, to study the behavior, to make sense of it. And I feel like it's a bit of a little bit like me. Like I always try to make sense of behavior of other people, to imitate it, because so in that situation, that social interaction between these two people is acceptable, so I need to imitate that, right? So that's how humans work, right? That's how I always like feel a bit of an alien who doesn't really know how I should behave right now. So I overthought my own behavior, because if I step into my ADHD, okay, in hindsight I can say ADHD behavior, it would not be rewarded necessarily, because it would be perceived as being too much, or complicated, or weird, or whatever. So you put on basically a mask and try to study people's behavior. I mean, that's my experience, right? So study people's behavior, but then you figure out in the end that, again, it's also different for every person. So for every person you meet, you basically have to unlearn everything that you learned about studying behavior from a previous person, because it doesn't work for everybody. So it's like lots of overthinking of how to act right now, and trying to hide who you really are. And that's actually what's really draining the energy is actually not ADHD itself. It's pretending not to have ADHD. That's actually the biggest energy drainer. And so yeah, I mean, I've been masking a lot in the past, and I possibly still mask nowadays every now and then. I think I observe it better than before, but it's also about then finding the right people who are good for you, and being in an environment where you are accepted for who you are, which of course doesn't excuse every behavior that you have. Like, if it's been coming for you to insult every person, of course that's not necessarily commendable to continue doing, simply because it's an impulsive thought. You don't like this person's whatever, and because like this impulsive thought comes to your mind to say something about it, it doesn't, it's not maybe commendable to do it. However, you should feel, in a situation where you feel safe enough to be who you are. These kind of people where where you can be completely comfortable to just sit together in silence. I mean, that's probably the best thing that can happen to you, if you find these kind of people. Even though if it's 2 ADHD years, I'm not sure like how long it's going to be silent. But yeah, that's also like what does professionalism mean? How do you need to dress apparently? And basically like, bending yourself or molding yourself into somebody who are not just so you fit in, but fitting in doesn't mean that you belong, because you deny yourself, you deny certain parts of yourself in exchange for being accepted, and that's the big issue here at stake. So yeah, masking has been a big one for me, definitely.
I had this conversation on a previous episode, and we were discussing masking, and I thought about my own history with presenting in different ways depending on what situations I was in, and I came to the conclusion that there are many versions of Alex depending on where I am or what I'm doing or how well I know someone. But it's never something I have to force. It's never like a conscious effort to act a different way or to look a different way. But there is definitely some drastic different versions of me. If I meet someone new, I can shake their hand confidently, and I can have a good posture, and I can look very confident. But then maybe half an hour later, I'm not getting anything from that situation anymore, and I don't have the energy, and I can almost come across as quite rude and completely different. But the version of me at the beginning of the meeting wasn't fake, and it wasn't forced, and the version of me half an hour later isn't fake or forced. So, is that masking? Would you think? Like
that's a fantastic question. I don't necessarily think so, because it's like, there's like more than one way of how we can show up, and it also depends on the social situation. I find it difficult to like put in like, draw like a red line, what is masking, what not. But I would simply throw the question in the room: is the way that you show up to other people, is that draining your energy very constantly, or do you constantly feel that you don't feel safe for who you are. I think that's possibly the question here. Because you can, you might feel completely safe regardless of, regardless the way you show up. Like if you show up as like the, firm handshake, confident Alex, you might feel safe. If you show up as, the more quiet and reserved version, if you still feel safe in the situation and feel okay about that, then maybe it's not masking. So yeah, I would not necessarily draw a red line in the sand, but I think it's more about the question: do you feel comfortable to show up as who you are right now, or do you feel you have to deny or deny these parts of you because you might be afraid of negative consequences? So I think the question of safety plays a big role there.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting to maintain a level of presentation that is in a situation that's no longer giving you the energy, and that you need to maintain that version of yourself. I think for me, if I was ever in a situation and I was the strong, confident, good posture, firm handshake, loud voice version of Alex, and then I, for whatever reason, lost my energy from that situation, and then I changed to sort of the more reserved version of Alex, I suppose there probably have been some situations in the past where I have maintained that other version of me in order to keep up appearances, and in order to not, like you said, appear to be inconsistent, or appear to be not who they wanted me to be in that situation. And I don't know if there's an element of like people pleasing in there, or perhaps, I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where I don't work for anybody, or I don't have a boss, or I don't. But I can see that if you were in that position, and I have been in that position in the past, where you might be fearful of your position if you were perceived to be a certain way, and that certain way might be the way you're the most comfortable in presenting, or the one that you feel the most safe in. But it's not necessarily the image that you think your boss wants you to show. So I can see that there can be a massive gap between how someone might be feeling inside in their sort of natural, safe version of themselves, and how they feel that they need to present themselves. And I suppose that's probably quite a privileged position that I'm coming from, where I'm saying I've never ever faked it or forced it. Did you want to? Obviously, you do a lot of ADHD life coaching. Where can people find you?
On LinkedIn, and only on only on LinkedIn, because if I went to any other social media platform, I would possibly die. It's like managing LinkedIn alone is enough for me, and so that's like the best place to find, like the only place basically to find me.
No, it's easier to keep it in one space sometimes. Okay, Christian, I think we'll leave it there if you've got to shoot off, because I could talk to you for hours, and I'd love to have you back on another time, and we can go over some other things. But I think we've covered a lot, and I think it's going to be a big episode for people, and hopefully it'll be valuable. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you too, and thanks for all the work that you're doing, and helping people feel seen. That's super important. And it's great that you use like the reach that you have, at least from what I see on LinkedIn, for exactly that. I'm very very happy to see what I'm looking forward to see like how this podcast is gonna come along and what it's gonna turn into. So pretty cool. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, me too. If I can just help, a couple of people listening and make them feel less alone, that's really the goal of the podcast. And yeah, I don't really have a long-term plan for the podcast, as you probably can relate, just going day by day at the moment and seeing what happens, so I don't get overwhelmed and crash and burn and don't do anything. One episode at a time. But no, thank you so much, Christian. I really appreciate your time, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, have a good one. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.